Carl, let's start with the problem, and that is our prisons are full and overflowing, that a lot of these prisoners, when they get out, are going to end up back in jail, and the vast majority of them go into jail with some sort of substance abuse problem, correct? Which contributes to them being there in the first place and to their recidivism.
That's absolutely correct.
Tell me more about that.
Well, that's a good summary, and you gave a good summary of the presenting problem and of crowding and backing up in your regional jails, and of the analysis that the Justice Center did. We did this works from May to the current time, and we're going to be back in West Virginia during your legislative session to see if we can help the legislature enact the policy framework that we have proposed just yesterday.
Carl, from what I've read from your information, a lot of the focus on how we can fix this is on treatment of people with substance abuse. And again, I know there'll be some eye rolling out there that goes, yeah, why are we going to give criminals treatment? But yeah, it's an economic issue. I mean, first of all, we don't do a very good job in that right now. Matter of fact, we do almost nothing in that right now, correct?
Well, that's a good summary also. We did not learn as much about the behavioral health and substance abuse treatment system as I would have liked to, but one conclusion that we came away with is that there's not very much being spent now within the criminal justice system or outside of it, although the governor's advisory committee on substance abuse has made some headway in recent months.
Carl, why is that significant in this whole discussion about what we do with our prisoners and about recidivism?
Well, it shows up in the data, and it showed up in all of our interviews with stakeholders, and we talked to hundreds of people. The problem of substance abuse is really overwhelming the criminal justice system in West Virginia. And, frankly, I felt like some of the people we were talking to who work in the system are beginning to be traumatized by the level of and the severity of substance abuse problems that they're seeing in the people that come before them on the bench and in prosecutors' offices.
What do you mean by that? Anecdotally, what do you mean by that?
Well, we heard comments about many times about from judges and prosecutors basically saying, I'm not trying to be hard on these people. I'm blocking them up to save their lives. Someone that's just spiraling downward. They're seeing a lot of people. The phrase "sea of addiction" was used a number of times. There's just a real concern across the actors in the system, the people who carry out the sentences in West Virginia, that this problem is overwhelming the system. And we felt like we needed to really be responsive to that. And we saw substance abuse as an indicator in lots of different ways that we looked. For example, 62% of the people who get revoked from probation and end up in prison show as having a very high substance abuse need, according to a particular instrument. Most of the people who were revoked from parole, one of the reasons cited was dirty urine or substance abuse use, basically while they were under supervision. The number of people that are coming to prison for drug offenses is increasing, and property offenses as well. And we feel fairly confident that a lot of property offenses that lead to prison time are fueled by an addiction problem.
Carl Reynolds is with us, and he is with the Council of State Governments Justice Center. They've done a lot of work in this area with a lot of states. Texas is a great example where they've had success in instituting a lot of treatment on the front end, during, and on the back end for prisoners to try to reduce the prison population, try to get people back on the straight and narrow. Carl, one of the things I'm told that happens in West Virginia is, let's say that somebody is they're busted, or it's a crime and maybe drugs are involved. They committed a crime because they're an addict or a dozen other things. So they go to jail and they're an addict, and there's no real treatment going in or during. Then they get out, and maybe they serve their entire time, and maybe they're not even on parole when they get out, and they're still an addict. I mean, nothing's changed. They just haven't had access to drugs for a period of time while they're in jail. They're still an addict, and they have no coping mechanism to deal with the addiction, correct?
Correct.
And so they're back. So we see them again.
Yeah. And one of the things that we pointed out to the working group yesterday is that you do have a good substance abuse treatment program in your prison system. It has 427 slots, and so it serves hopefully about 800 people a year, a couple of 6-month stay in that center, and we were able to do an evaluation of the work that they do, and it's pretty darn good. It's not as good as it could be, but it's a pretty darn good program. But that's where the only money is for substance abuse treatment in your criminal justice system. Probation and parole get $0 to provide treatment services. And you've got treatment providers in West Virginia, but they have very little incentive to reach out to the criminal justice population and serve them. And they have a right to refuse service to people, and they may not want to deal with this population that's being told to go to treatment rather than self-motivated. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us in providing an infrastructure for treatment services for those people who are in the community and still need drug treatment. We don't want to rely only on prison for people to get drug treatment.
Well, how do we do that? I mean, we have a behavioral health system in West Virginia, as you alluded to. So how do we do that?
Well, that's I think a story that is going to unfold over the next few months, because we are still trying to get our arms around what that should look like. We do think that the investment money that we're proposing should flow through the criminal justice system rather than simply being appropriated to the behavioral health system. We think that in order to bridge the gap between these two systems, we've got to start with money in the hands of the criminal justice folks to get this done. So that's one principle. Another sort of a wild card, I guess, is that when we gave our report yesterday, the fellow who represents the behavioral health treatment providers around the state stood up and said, "Hey, we're about to issue a big proposal to do a comprehensive job of addressing this very issue. So, stay tuned." And we said, please send it to us when you issue it. So that's coming, and we have to take stock of that and see what we think of it.
Well, you and I talked yesterday for a period of time, and you talked about the economics of this. And maybe it's not exactly dollar for dollar, but the cost of treatment versus the cost of holding an inmate in a state prison for a year. Give me those economics.
Well, we know that it costs $24,000 in round figures to house somebody in West Virginia prison. We did some estimates of the cost of providing treatment based in the community, based on some national figures and national cost estimates that aren't specifically tailored to West Virginia. And you all have some transportation challenges.
Right.
The way West Virginia physically is, it creates challenges for all kinds of service provision. But we used some national estimates to say, things along the lines of, in fact, let me pull up my slide and I'll get it right. I remember that the treatment in the residential treatment, even though someone is on probation or parole, would run around $7,000 a treatment episode. Mm-hmm. Intensive outpatient treatment, $3,500. Outpatient treatment, less intensive, $1,600. Those kinds of figures sprinkled across about 1,900 people on probation and parole yields an overall cost, an overall estimate that we need $6.8 million a year to provide that kind of treatment. Now, we proposed to the working group that of the money that would be saved by averting the growth of prisons, that at least $5 million a year be reinvested in substance abuse treatment. So we feel like we're taking a huge bite at the scope of the problem, but even that bite is not necessarily enough.
Mm-hmm. Carl, we're talking with Carl Reynolds, who's with the Council of State Governments. The Justice Center did this big report for West Virginia to give us an alternative way of dealing with this prison overcrowding issue. As I said, that would cost at least $200 million to build a new prison, and we're right on the verge of, and at first blush again, I know how these arguments go. You might say, well, why do you have to do that? What would happen is, because it's happened before, that if you just keep jamming inmates in there, somebody will file a suit, they'll go to a judge will order you either to release inmates or build a new prison, and there you are. So you need to take it from a public policy front before a judge gets involved and starts shutting places down or releasing inmates. So you're faced with this possibility of spending $200 million on a new prison, then the operational costs, or spending some money on the front end and the back end of treating inmates who have substance abuse issues and doing a better job of supervision when inmates get out of prison, and ultimately saving some money. So is that correct? That's kind of a rosy characterization, Carl, but is that how you guys are pitching this thing?
That's basically it.
You did this in Texas. Did it work in Texas?
Well, it has worked, and there's. I sent you an article from today's paper in Austin,
right,
where I am, that indicated that people are actually seeking even more of the same, more reform in the same direction. One of our biggest business-oriented groups in the state has come out in favor of continued tinkering with the Texas criminal justice system to make it more cost-effective in the same kind of way, building up the capacity to deal with people at either end of the system, the prison system itself, so that those components are strengthened and we do a better job of containing any possible growth.
Sam, I don't want to go all squishy here, but this is because sometimes when we talk about these kinds of things, there is criticism from those who say, well, now you're getting soft on crime. I don't think this is about being soft on crime. I think this is about being economically smart about this, because a lot of people who end up in the criminal justice system, I'm going to make generalizations here. Yes, they've committed a crime, but and they may be addicts, or they may have addiction issues, but they didn't set out to be an addict. It happens, and before you know it, they're in over their heads, and they're committing crimes because of their addiction. Then they get out, and if they get out and they're not under supervision, and our recidivism is really high in that first year that they're out. If they can make it past the first year, they have a better chance, but then the recidivism is real high. So much of this is directly linked to the addiction issue. Again, not a very good question, but a statement that I guess I'm looking to be reinforced on.
Yeah, I think you put it very well.
So where do we go from here? You guys are deeply involved in this. You're going to be back before the West Virginia legislature. Where do we go?
Well, we're going to be back. I'm actually back in Austin, starting to piece together my suggestions for the drafting of the legislation that we'll share with folks in the Capitol and get a bill put together. And we'll take it from there. We'll see what the committees in the House and Senate, in the House of Delegates, think of our draft and try to move it through the system.
Carl Reynolds,
and at the
go
same
ahead.
time, we've got some real positive signs. We've got the Supreme Court adopting a very compatible recommendation to our work, where they're asking the judges in the state to make sure that there's a state-of-the-art risk need assessment done on people that are charged with felonies. That's unfolding, and I think there was a press release about that yesterday. We've got the parole board agreeing to start hearing cases where the person doesn't have a home plan, at least giving them a vote on their parole so that things can progress on releasing them from prison if they can get a home plan. We've got good developments administratively, and then we'll also have the overlay of some new legislation.
And by the way, just as a final thought, this is not just West Virginia. This is everywhere, isn't it? This is all across the country that everybody's fighting this fight, same fight.
Yes, it is. It is. A lot of states are doing it formally through the justice reinvestment process that we've brought to West Virginia. And by the way, West Virginians aren't paying a penny for the work that we're doing. It's being paid for by the federal government and by private foundation funding. So it's a win-win. We get to do the work, and we love doing it, and West Virginia gets the benefit of hopefully our insight.
Carl Reynolds, Senior Legal and Policy Counsel with the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Carl, appreciate your time. It's good stuff, and I appreciate you coming on.